I was afraid that if I did anything she felt uncomfortable with, even by accident, she might suddenly pull away or panic. And then I'd be seen as the guy who crossed the line. In a club full of people, there would have been no shortage of guys eager to step in and save her from me. The thought of being misunderstood like that terrified me.
Hi, I'm Jeroen. Welcome to Deep Skate Theory. This is one of the most, probably the most vulnerable thing I've ever shared publicly. And I've hesitated a long time to share it because, going through the memories, it's very intense, like an emotional roller coaster. And also I wasn't sure whether I want to share it with the world. I don't know, it's personal. But then I think I really need to share it anyway, because I believe it's a uncommon story about autism, which gives, I think, a more respectful view on autism and much more nuanced, which I think is really needed. This story took place before I knew I had autism. I now understand it through that lens, but at its core, the story is somebody as a teenager growing up, just thinking that, he's just another guy trying to make the best of life. And that means growing up, navigating connection, and discovering an unexpected kind of intimacy. Something I didn't knew it was possible. And a lot of people don't know, but some people do know, who are into dancing. There's nothing graphic or shocking about the story as far as I can tell, but it's a little bit emotionally raw, so it won't be relatable or advisable to everyone. Anyway, I think that's okay. It's just my experience. Then if that sounds okay with you, let's begin.
This isn't a story about the perfect romance, it's a story about being lost in my own skin. Until one night, on a crowded dance floor, something unexpected happened that changed everything I thought I knew about connection. As a teenager, I had nearly zero self-confidence. Similar to most autistic teens, I couldn't keep up with my classmates socially. I was quiet, withdrawn, and often left out, and I didn't understand why. Interaction with girls at high school was even more limited than interaction with boys. I didn't understand why girls rarely initiated conversation with me one-on-one. I had this idea, a preconception, that girls were supposed to be more sociable than boys. So, if they weren't talking to me, I figured, I must be too weird, too unattractive, not someone worth talking to. One of the most awkward situations was when I ended up sitting next to a girl in biology class for a whole school year. There were no other tables left, so we were stuck next to each other. I was kind of attracted to her. Every class I tried to think of something I could say, anything to break the ice, but nothing ever came to my mind that I found worth saying. I felt so uncomfortable, I didn't even dare to look in her direction. And she never spoke to me either. We spent an entire year sitting next to each other, without ever exchanging a single word or glance. The ice remained frozen, permanently. The fact that she never tried to speak to me only affirmed what I already believed. I was too weird, or too unattractive, for girls to even want to interact with. Another unexpected experience was when one day, on my way back to class after lunch, some girls from a lower school year approached me in the main hall. They told me that their friend wanted to ask me something. It sounded very suspicious to me, but I followed them to see what their friend had to ask. They brought me to a pretty cool-looking girl. When she asked with a straight face whether I wanted to be her boyfriend, I froze and I didn't know what to say. I was sure there was no way she could be serious and that they were playing a cruel joke on me. I thought that they were expecting me to say yes and then tell me it was of course a joke and they would laugh at me. So I just walked away feeling very startled, but relieved, thinking that I at least had avoided a much bigger embarrassment. I can't remember any of the girls laughing behind me though. When a classmate asked me what those girls wanted from me, I brushed it off saying, "Oh, nothing." I felt too ashamed about the alleged prank attempt to even talk about it. Looking back at this situation many years later, I realized that I had probably misjudged the girl because of my false belief that I was unattractive. I had misjudged her because I always had to be on guard to not end up as the victim of someone's practical joke. Unintentionally, by trying to protect myself, I had possibly broken the poor girl's heart long before anyone would break mine. After the extreme stress of high school finally ended, university left me with much more space and energy to start exploring social interaction with girls. I was lucky to have some friends who were a lot more outgoing and brave with this. We started going out to clubs every weekend. I found it terrifying but also very exciting. I loved the loud music and the rhythmic beat blocking out any other sound, and I was mesmerized by the colorful lighting. My friends were strolling through corridors working out how to approach girls in order to kiss them. I was envious of their occasional successes, but I had great difficulty talking and hearing others in such a loud environment. So I quickly gave up the idea of following their approach. I decided to just stick with the dance floor, trying to figure out how to enjoy dancing to the music without making too much of a fool of myself. I eventually came to love dancing on my own, as long as I didn't get too self-conscious, which was mitigated with the help of some Dutch courage. Every night out, after coming home at 5 a.m. or later, I had my ritual of sitting down at the couch, staring at the ceiling for a couple of hours, letting all the experience of the evening pass by and settle down in my head before going to bed. I didn't know why I needed this, but it was the only way for me to slow my mind down enough to be able to sleep. In the beginning, just dancing on my own didn't get me into contact with anyone. Instead, I just observed how others interacted with each other. I often wished I could be invisible, just to observe how others made social interaction seem so effortless. Unfortunately, in daily life, I quickly found out that people don't really appreciate being stared at. At clubs, however, staring at each other is much more accepted and actually part of the fun. So it was fascinating for me to just witness what was going on between people. I also experimented with eye contact. For the first year or so, that was basically all the interaction I had with girls in the club. The strangest thing for me was that when a pretty girl looked me in the eyes, it felt like she physically touched me. I found it scary but intriguing at the same time. I didn't know if it meant anything when a girl looked at me, I just knew it gave me this special feeling. That summer, we headed to one of those holiday spots where teenagers from across the country gather in hopes of discovering romance. I thought that if there was still any chance for me to meet a girl who would fancy me, it should have been there. I must have been 18 years old. One night, when we walked into our favorite club, my attention was immediately drawn to this gorgeous girl on the dance floor. She seemed like someone everyone noticed, and I couldn't imagine standing out in that crowd. I admired her from a distance, convinced there was no version of reality where someone like her would be interested in someone like me. Later that night, I was enjoying the flow of dancing solo as usual, when out of nowhere, the girl I had admired earlier walked up to me and said, "Hi, what's your name?" My brain froze for a second. Was this really happening? I said, "I'm Jeroen, what's your name?" She told me hers, and I tried my best to repeat her name in my mind a couple of times, since I tend to forget names the second after I hear them. This time, I didn't make the same mistake, assuming that it couldn't possibly mean anything for her to take the courage to approach me. I'm not sure how I figured it out. Maybe it was the way she stared at me, or just a logical conclusion from our earlier eye contact and now being approached by her, but something in me chose to throw reason aside, skip the small talk, and reciprocate her move by going straight for the kiss. I remember being stunned by how surreal it felt when she tilted her head and warmly accepted my very first kiss. While struggling to believe this was really happening, I felt her arms gently fold around my neck, pulling us into a tight embrace. A deep sense of peace came over me, like being wrapped in a warm blanket, shielding me from everything happening around us. Since her kiss had the power to freeze time, I have no clue how long it actually lasted. It could have been a minute, could also have been an hour, but eventually all good things come to an end, of course. I know some autistic people don't like touching or kissing so much, for instance because it feels too intense or seems disgusting. I do like the intensity of how touch feels to me, sometimes, depending on the person and the way of touching. And I absolutely love kissing. But there I was, staring into her deep blue eyes again, just significantly closer than when I first saw her. So, now what? Turns out I hadn't thought even a second beyond the kiss. I had no exit plan, no script, zero idea what to do next. In any case, it didn't really matter to me that much. That one kiss was enough for me to make my day, my week, my life. If that one kiss would have been all, and my chariot would turn back into a pumpkin at the stroke of midnight, I would still have been so thankful for that experience alone. Unless I would just wake up and realize it was only a dream. But I didn't wake up, and the best was yet to come, though probably not in the way you'd expect. Still recovering from that first kiss, I realized she had started moving in an attempt to dance together. The only problem was I had never danced with someone before. I was always just dancing on my own. Dancing in front of someone else always made me too self-conscious, causing me to snap out of the flow and return to my usual state of physical rigidity. And in any case, how could she ever expect us to dance standing so close together? One of my legs was stuck between hers, and she moved in a very different way from how I danced. I couldn't make any move without brushing or bumping against her. The discomfort quickly became unbearable to me, but backing up to get more space was impossible, because she still had her arms locked around my neck. It might sound funny to you, but I couldn't think of any socially acceptable way to get out of the trap I was in, and I felt a panic rising. I knew I wouldn't be able to tolerate this sensory torture much longer. I pretended to stay cool, but inside, I was crashing. A mental shutdown felt imminent, the kind where my mind turns completely inward, cuts off all interaction, and can't even form a sentence to explain what's happening. And it wasn't just panic I was managing, even joy had the power to overwhelm me. I accepted that probably the moment has come where she finds out that she accidentally kissed a fraud, who has no clue how to be with a girl at the club. She'll probably regret kissing me and move on to the next guy. And that would have been okay too. At the very least, I'd managed to pass as the kind of guy she'd want to be with, and that felt like a compliment. But since I was stuck there anyway, I thought I might as well try to figure out how I had to use my legs and body to mimic her movement. At least one thing seemed absolutely clear to me. With our bodies in full contact from thighs to chest, any workable solution to this anatomical puzzle should have to involve moving in the same way that she did. Luckily, my hypothesis turned out to be correct. After a couple of minutes uncomfortably bumping into each other, I managed to crack the code of her hip movement. Once I synced myself up with her sway, we could finally start to move freely and fluidly, while remaining locked together. No more brushing and bumping. Phew, I thought, managed to dodge that bullet. Finally I can just relax and continue enjoying some more time with her. Little did I know that something else was about to happen I never saw coming, as she started playing with our newly gained freedom of movement. First I thought, oh no, I just managed to cope with the situation, and now she's making it even more difficult.
What, you can't keep up?
But I did manage to keep up with her, mostly. She seemed to be testing my range of movement, very playful. Still, to be totally honest with you, I was more than a little intimidated at first, coming from never having been romantic with anyone just an hour ago. I thought my unannounced kiss was a pretty daring move, but she totally one-upped me with this one. Classic case of be careful what you wish for. I was like, whoa, this is getting way spicier than I was expecting. What did I get myself into? Way beyond my comfort zone. It's not that I didn't like it. Quite the opposite, actually. I was scared I'd like it too much. I wasn't sure what was expected of me, or what any of it meant. It felt like she was placing her full trust in me, physically and emotionally. And I didn't know if I could live up to that. I was afraid that if I did anything she felt uncomfortable with, even by accident, she might suddenly pull away or panic. And then I'd be seen as the guy who crossed the line. In a club full of people, there would have been no shortage of guys eager to step in and save her from me. The thought of being misunderstood like that terrified me. But the way she handled me before told me she must be a genuinely gentle and caring person. So I trusted that she didn't mean to make me feel uncomfortable, and took her example as a guide for what was okay. I figured what mattered most here wasn't the specifics of what we did, but the intentions behind it. So I told myself, it's just a dance. Enjoy it for what it is and don't read too much into it. Slowly, I began to relax enough to actively join her in this tactile, sensual game of movement, allowing my feelings to just be as they were, no longer something to be scared of. And that's when it happened. Oh my god, no way. The whole experience suddenly flipped on its head. It was like a portal to a different dimension had opened up and sucked me in. There was absolutely nothing subtle or gradual about it. Like someone just flipped a switch. All of a sudden, it felt like my senses had expanded. Like I could feel her rhythm, her movement, even her emotional presence, as if they were part of me. We weren't following steps, it was just movement, responsive, instinctive. I didn't understand what was happening between us yet, but I immediately felt a shift, like we'd stopped moving to the music and started moving to shared emotion. For the first time in a social setting, I wasn't overwhelmed or self-conscious. I wasn't performing or analyzing. I was just there, fully present with her, and she with me. It felt like the pressure of everyday communication had lifted, replaced by something more primal and pure. Connection through touch, movement, and trust. I had never expected that just dancing with someone could feel so profound. And I couldn't remember seeing couples dance like this, though maybe that was just because if I'd seen it, I probably would have looked away immediately, not wanting to intrude. As we were kind of in the middle of the dance floor, I half expected someone to step in and send us away. Luckily, we were left in peace there, remaining in this sensual flow for the rest of the night, right up until closing time. Although I wasn't expecting any follow-up, we exchanged letters and photos after the holiday. But since she lived far away, and I avoided phone calls like the plague because they always made me a nervous wreck, I tried to get to know each other first through writing. Until I didn't get any letter back anymore. So I never saw her again, which was probably for the best. I felt sad that we couldn't be together. In just a couple of hours, she went from being a pretty girl I kissed and danced with, to someone who had opened herself up to me, and to whom I'd shown my real, unmasked self. I could spend weeks or even months dating someone and still not feel this kind of connection. But because there were no built-up expectations, it wasn't the kind of heartache I'd later feel after any attempt to have a relationship crashed before it even got off the ground. Mostly, I felt a profound sense of gratitude towards her. I honestly couldn't have imagined a more beautiful way to begin a new chapter in my young adult life. Still, I had a long road of self-development ahead, before I would be capable of being in a relationship at all, and before I could truly understand what happened to me that night. Because that night didn't give me all the answers, and I know this kind of experience isn't accessible or even desirable for everyone. I expect that some people would even judge me negatively for dancing the way we did, in public, with someone I just met in a club. But for me, it was a crack in the wall I'd lived behind for years. A wall that I've been trying to understand and chip away at ever since. It showed me a version of myself I didn't know existed. Someone who could be desired. Someone who could share feelings without needing to speak. Someone capable of deep connection. And while that experience didn't magically make all my social challenges disappear, it offered me a truth I still hold on to today. There are many ways to speak, and not all of them require words. But that night wasn't the end, just the beginning.
That night opened the door, not just to understanding connection, but also to understanding myself. In part 2, I'll share how this life-changing experience shaped my understanding of connection and intimacy, as well as how the contrast with the rest of my life led to my autism diagnosis.